So like most industries, cybersecurity industry has many different angles where not necessarily every company can either build within or acquire. In many cases, it actually makes a lot of sense to find a strong partner that might help form a lot of synergies for yourselves. And these could be global partnerships. They can be completely from off the grid, ones that you wouldn't necessarily think about. Maybe it's finding a consultant, and that consultant helps recommend your products. Maybe it's working with an insurance company or a law firm, but partnerships can come in all shapes and forms. And this panel is going to talk about some of the creative ways that they've actually formed partnerships across the cybersecurity industry, maybe some things that they're working on, and we'll let them take it away. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we've got James just walking down. Look at that. Right. Yeah, I think we're actually operating right on time. Thanks, James. So I'm actually particularly excited about this panel because of the breadth of coverage that we've got from everyone here. We've got folks coming from the New York Economic Development Council, and then likewise we've got people who are operating within the IT security infrastructure, but then also those on the back end of that in the form of ERI. So what I'm going to do as we kick off is I think there's a few slides that we have. And so rather than just introduce names, I'm going to let the teams here, just essentially give an intro of what they do, so you've got a background because of the breadth of different organizations that we've got on stage. So do we have the...
Andrew, slides?
We have the slides.
Aha, okay. I'm Mary Dickinson from Artemis Cyber, and basically cyber partnerships are essential for success because there's just too much to do it alone. It's not possible for any one CISO to handle all the various threats that are coming at them. Next slide. We're Artemis, we're the Greek goddess of the hunt, and we've created a cyber SWAT team with partners you can trust, with solutions you can trust. And our cornerstone partner is Jack Devine, who is the ex-head of operations for the CIA. And another of our key partners is Xenocrates, who's joining us here and have a booth outside as well.
Great.
And you are probably vulnerable if you're in this room to either GDPR or 23 NYCRR 500. These regulations are pretty draconian. You've heard a lot about GDPR, but we heard today about a $500 million fine, a large component of which was the NYCRR 500 penalty. So these are very, very broad regulations that touch upon almost everyone who touches money or anyone's information around money in New York State. We also are active in cyber due diligence. M&A due diligence is critical. You've heard the TNT FedEx acquisition reference here. This cost them $300 million immediately and billions in write-down later. You really need to add cybersecurity due diligence to your checklist.
So ERI, we are the largest information destruction provider in the country. And so we're really in the space as the physical safeguard at the end of your equipment. So when we're looking at building the cyber infrastructure, at the end, you want to make sure no matter how much it's encrypted, no matter how much security you have in place, eventually you want to retire that data. You can go to the next slide. And so really we started on the environmental side as a recycling company, but more and more of our clients started really making sure that their PII was protected through the end of life. And recently there was a study that found 40% of all hard drives that are out there at the end of life still contain PII even after they've gone through a recycler. So this is where we see the real challenges on cybersecurity is making sure that all the upfront protection you have is protected. And so what we do is we provide that nationwide footprint, and we're able to partner with any entities to really help them complete the chain. So.
Great.
I don't have any slides.
But you can introduce yourself.
I sure can, right? Okay, good. So, good afternoon, everyone. I'm James Patchett. I'm the president of the city's Economic Development Corporation. So we're the organization that's responsible for driving and shaping the city's economic growth. We have a lot of key functions that we serve in order to do that. We own over 60 million square feet of property in the city. we invest in infrastructure, and most relevantly to this panel, we invest in economic development initiatives to support key sectors. And right now, we are all in on cyber. I think it is our complete confidence, we are completely confident that New York City should be the global hub for cyber, given the amazing Fortune 500 companies who are here, who are all in the market for cybersecurity services, and the growing tech economy that's happening in the city that's really just become this just incredible engine for growth over the last decade. Venture capital in the last decade in the city is up over 1,400%. It's grown faster in the city than in Silicon Valley. We've overtaken Boston, we're second in VC funding coming to New York City companies in the country. And whenever I travel internationally, I hear that everyone wants to be in New York. So I think we're super bullish on cyber right now. We're currently, we have a number of initiatives we're undertaking, which I can go into more detail on, but we are just really excited and believe, and we want to encourage everyone to come and build and grow their companies in New York City.
I'm going to just build off of what James mentioned there, because in my prior life, I was an operator and actually ran a couple of cybersecurity companies, most recently one based here in New York that we sold to Deloitte. And I've spoken to other investors now, and we all find it fascinating and feel like things actually do need to change, because the reality is the vast majority of the big enterprise customers for cybersecurity really are generally headquartered on the East Coast between New York and Washington, D.C. And yet, Silicon Valley has certainly become the location, the nexus, if you will, for cyber innovation. And I think that there's a lot of energy now to change that, and we're seeing a fair amount of that actually coming from New York EDC. But at any rate, I did want to move on to the first set of questions, and we're going to run through a number of different ways that one can think about partnerships in the realm of cybersecurity. The first I want to talk about is the public-private partnership, which I think is actually essential to this space. I think it's an area where probably more than any other private sector, if you will, I think there's a fantastically successful relationship between public and private organizations because we are generally all fighting the same adversary. But so maybe perhaps, James, you could start on that, and also perhaps also reference some of the international relationships that you guys have developed as well.
Sure, yeah, good. So I'll touch on, I guess, 3 areas where we are executing and believe that public-private partnerships really are the way to success in cybersecurity. So we are the public sector, so we're relying on the private sector in many ways. So as the first area is talent. So we all know it's one of the biggest challenges for growth in technology writ large. And so we are investing in talent at all levels to ensure that at the immediate, like the sort of immediate college level as well as the graduate level, that we're getting the skills that we need into students. We most recently launched in partnership with our cyber program, our New York City Department of Information Technology, in partnership with NYU, launched a program called NYC Cyber Fellows, which is a targeted master's program specifically creating job opportunities and at the end of it to work for the city. But also, obviously, we have partnerships as a part of that with a number of private companies like IBM who are deeply invested in ensuring that they can get better access to a pipeline of talent. The second area that we're investing in is just business creation and supporting businesses. We've put $30 million towards creating an accelerator and a hub in New York City to try and advance the great innovation that's happening here and make sure that we're providing that pipeline that we can to corporates, because we have a lot of those relationships and we want to be as helpful as we can in getting the companies that are coming off the ground and get them in the door to sell their products. And then the third area is obviously securing the city and the public sector. Goes without saying that voter registration is something we're all terrified about, protecting our electoral system. We are, I was speaking at the blockchain conference yesterday happening across town. There are so many innovations and we need the help of the private sector in order to secure our voting systems, and the city is deeply committed to ensuring that we have the best systems available, the most secure systems, so that our voters are safe and so that our election results are valid.
Thank you for that. The other quick one I wanted you to mention potentially was the partnership with Israel.
Yeah, absolutely. so I was in Israel about 2 months ago. I mean, I think everybody here knows what's happening, and what has happened in Israel is unbelievable in terms of the level of R&D. Every corporate has a R&D focused office over there just to try to make sure they're sucking up all the great innovation that's coming out of the military there, and the startups that have grown out of that. So we have as a part of that and some specific work we've been doing with them, we've been able to encourage a lot of Israeli companies to come and grow their operations in the city. And it's just a great example, as I said, New York City as the global hub for cyber. The European and Israeli companies, they want to come to New York. They don't want to go to Silicon Valley just for practical reasons. And so in that context, it's another reason why New York City makes a lot more sense in addition to the presence of the large corporates relative to the West Coast.
David?
For us, I think the public-private partnership, the key is really a trust. When you're trying to put yourself as a company out there and trying to show the level of security that you can provide, having a government partner is really going to go a long way. You know the government's doing that due diligence on you, or you hope. Yeah. And it builds that level. So we have a program with the city of New York where destroying data in about 8,000 apartment buildings throughout the city. There's absolutely no way that could have happened without that partnership with the city, because no buildings would just let any kind of private company across the board build that level of efficiency. And then obviously on the regulation side, it really helps just level the playing field.
We're lucky enough to be partnered with some extraordinary people who have government contracts, and we benefit from all of that because we are able to bring a depth of expertise to SMEs who would otherwise not be able to touch those kinds of assets. So ours is a more oblique relationship, but we take advantage of the fact that the best cyber minds in the world are trained by Cyber Command, NSA, CIA, DIA, pick your A. And we're fortunate in being able to harvest some of that talent and deploy it across the corporate landscape.
Great. Yeah, in my experience, especially working and servicing financial services clients here in New York, that relationship back to the federal government and the agency, the intel agencies, has been incredibly valuable. And I'm not sure, well, actually, I'll flip it around. I'd say I'm quite certain that we would have seen a lot more headlines had that public-private relationship not existed in the strength of it today. Okay, so moving on, we're going to jump ahead because, as I mentioned, there's a sort of wide-ranging topics that we can cover with regard to partnerships in cyber. But the next one, I actually wanted to shift gears and focus a little bit on the extent to which one can partner from everything from cyber security prevention, so active prevention measures, all the way through to risk mitigation. And so what one often finds is there's always this cost-benefit analysis that exists in the fact that we don't all have unlimited budgets. And so every dollar that is spent in cybersecurity needs to be grounded in the fact that you are measuring the cost-benefit of that investment. And so there's a certain portion that absolutely needs to be spent with regard to the prevention of exploits being taken advantage of. Yeah. But then the other flip side of that is, well, what's the cost benefit if we actually sort of insure that away or use other mitigation strategies? And so I just wanted to see what the opinions were here on the panel in terms of, perhaps Mary, you start with this, how you would advise clients in a consultative capacity to look at that, and when they're building their security architectures, how one would make those decisions with regard to active prevention versus mitigation.
Well, we tend to go in with a broad array of assets from a number of different potential client companies that we work with in order to create a mosaic approach to whatever the problem set is. So you're going to have a different problem set if you are a manufacturing concern rather than if you are a utility, or if you're a printing group or whatever. So we'll tend to bring in a group to assess what your budgetary limitations are, what level of expertise you have. You might not need the ex-CISO of the CIA as part of your group, but you may find that you're vulnerable to GDPR and NYCRR 500, and we may be able to find a group that has the capacity within your budget range to give you virtual access to a CISO and chief privacy officer and all of those things. I think you need to really focus on remediation, and I love the points that Tom Kellerman was making about having a hunt team if you have the capacity to do that, because you really do need to anticipate the fact that if they're not there and already in there, they're going to be, and you need to be proactive about that. It's not possible to beat them every time. And so you need to be reasonable about that and protect your data and ship it off site and create all of those protocols, which, because so many people are heads down, they don't have the time to do. One of our potential clients is a mattress manufacturer that's growing 25% quarter over quarter. They can barely keep up with demand, but what are they going to do? And they've asked, how do we protect ourselves, because we're an online provider and we have all this data? They need external sourcing for that. They're not going to hire internally, so we can help on a consultative basis.
I'll just follow up on it as well, just to think about this piece, which is, do you think that more should be done on the part of cybersecurity vendors to partner with insurance providers and the like to enhance that sort of spectrum of available services when it comes to, again, prevention versus mitigation?
I think that the problem with cybersecurity insurance right now is that it views too many things as exactly the same, and it's not a very nuanced approach, nor is it very detailed. The forms that you fill out for cybersecurity insurance are frankly pretty lame, generally speaking. And so I think that probably if we could assemble the panelists that we've had during the course of the day and lock them in a room with AIG and the other large insurers, we'd come out with a much better product set that's much more nuanced based on whether you are an e-commerce provider or whether you are a place that has physical locations, and what is the combo plate of those things, and how should that affect your pricing. Right now, they would have the same price if you're a shoe vendor or a shoe vendor. It's not right. But this lack of precision is due to the fact that we just don't have the data or the people in place at the insurance companies yet to really, from what I've understood, I'm not an insurance maven, but there are shortfalls in this. And if you have somebody like FedEx acquiring TNT and you have zero coverage, you're making a big mistake because you're not even asking the basic questions of yourself or your acquisition.
David, James?
What I would say is our perspective is a little bit different, which is when it comes to securing the public sector. And in some cases, I think this applies to our largest the largest element of our tax base, which is our finance sector. You almost can't insure against the risk, the trust risk associated with the threat to, just take the electoral system as an example. There's no insurance product that can be created that makes people, okay, if the voting system gets hacked one time, then everyone will feel good because the government gets a large financial payout. Right. Which I'm not. I don't say that lightly. It is a legitimately some of these issues are so fundamentally about trust and therefore are so existential to the business's success when it's about customer trust and belief. And when you have a financial relationship with an organization, you are relying on them with your financial assets, or in the government's case, the faith in your government. You almost can't insure against that. So I won't speak to the trade-offs in particular products, but I will say first for the largest sector in New York City, which is the finance sector, 20% of our economy. In a lot of ways, I think that's more existential and something that, to a degree, can't be insured against effectively or completely. And certainly, when it applies to the government, I think it extends beyond something that is a risk that you can just mitigate with financial considerations.
Yeah, on our end, we really, the key is building a plan. You want to do as much prevention. There is no perfect solution, and then in the end, there will be a breach. But if you have a plan and you've put in all those prevention factors in place, then you can then build your risk portfolio, and you can also be prepared to respond when something does happen. If you just focus solely on risk, you're still not preparing yourself.
I think what's interesting about ERI is you guys as an organization sort of are an insurance product in a way, right? You know, you've got this data destruction capability, which allows people to have a guarantee that that data is not actually out there in the universe anywhere. And that was something that you moved into, right, as a strategic driver for the business.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, essentially the way we originally built our model was as a recycling company. We were the place where all your trash, your e-scrap ended up. And that it was no longer viable when we're dealing with PII. It simply was, you know, with everything out there, you need to know exactly what's happening to your data. I need to know, you know, it would always start as sort of a joke. Oh, you know, I don't want my old photos from college, you know, ending up anywhere. And then eventually it kind of grew and grew until it became this real issue. And so, yeah, we had to completely rebuild our facilities to make sure that no data is at risk of leaving our facility until it's 100% secured and destroyed. So it's no longer a management issue. It's no longer actually out there. And depending on who you are, 3-letter agency, you're going down to an NSA level destruction, or a little bit less, a little bit more manageable. But regardless, you need to make sure that it's at that level where it's no longer existent.
Great. So shifting gears once again, moving to a third area of partnerships in cybersecurity. We heard from a panel earlier today, the CISO Fantasy Dream Team, what their key priorities were in terms of building out their security architectures. And so, you know, not everyone has that CISO dream team, and not everyone has the unlimited budgets that a lot of those organizations actually bring to the table. So then it starts to become a question of the sort of build versus buy. And there are legitimate costs and benefits to building a solution in-house and being able to pick and choose each of the different sort of best-of-breed products that you want to put in place versus going to a third-party provider. And so I think the other question that I wanted to ask of all of you is you know, what are the decision-making strategies that you would actually advise an organization to go through when thinking about building versus buying on the security frontier?
Our general advice is that you have to have someone within your organization who actually understands how to understand the answers to the questions that are coming at you. Unfortunately, there aren't that many people around, but you need to have somebody in your organization that you are willing to educate so that they can at least be a talented cyber generalist. And then, and I'm talking mostly for SMEs, because there is a huge, you know, there's been reference to the 1 million person gap. If you have a child or around who needs a job, this is the place to send them. But we create a cyber SWAT team that can help alleviate some of these concerns and can even help educate someone who is a bright person and a talented manager or C-suite person to be able to understand the nature of the threats that they're facing and the priorities that they should put in place in order to address prevention and remediation within their organization and be compliant with these new regulations that are coming fast and furious.
So on our end, there really isn't a build or buy option. You've got companies who are going to say, yes, I make sure I format my hard drive or I do some level of destruction before it leaves the facility. But in the end, devices have ends of life. There is going to be a legacy issue. And so it's really a matter of figuring out what protection you're able to do in-house to make sure that you are able to trust your third-party partner, and then it's doing that due diligence on your third party and knowing where it's going, not just I have somebody who's going to give me a piece of paper that says they destroyed the data, but knowing where is that actual equipment going to be destroyed.
So knowing that this was something that you shifted into as an organization later on, I'm assuming you had to build up that base of expertise in-house and then start to actually provide services according to a chain of custody and things like that. I don't know if you could speak to the breadth of services that you offer with regard to that to ensure that people have the audit trails.
Yeah, of course. I mean, in the end, it's a planning issue and it's a budget issue. So you need to decide when you're getting rid of data, how much are you able to spend on that one device, essentially. Because we can come on site, we can shred that data and provide you a make, model, serial number of every single device that you destroyed. We can allow you to ship the data through courier service to our facility, and then same thing, we'll provide you that make, model, serial number. We will pull out the hard drive from the parent device and make sure it's destroyed. We can both wipe and shred down to different level sizes of the destruction. So it's a matter of, as we sort of talked about, the service is there, and it's a matter of determining how crucial is that data on your device, how much are you able to build that into your plan, essentially. Okay.
Yeah, sure. I guess I would say two things. One is, from my own perspective, running a large organization, and this is the experience we hear from all of the corporate partners we work with is, I mean, you mentioned the word cyber to a CEO like myself. It's like, I mean, I had this meeting, we're doing our budget season right now. It's like, tell me what you need, which I think is the reason that there's the 1 million person gap, because no one wants to have that risk on their plate that there was a budgetary request around cybersecurity and that you didn't fund it and then something terrible happens. So I would say, I think the ultimate answer is obviously that it's a mix of both. To me, the most significant challenge right now, I will talk about a financial institution who will go unnamed, but I was meeting with their R&D team, and they were telling me it takes them 18 months to bring in new innovations from the outside. And this is someone who works at this very large international financial institution saying how painful that is for them as the person who is tasked with innovation in R&D in cyber, and how challenging it is to bring those innovations in-house at a large institution, and how much of a risk that is to that organization. So they acknowledge that they cannot possibly in-house build the level of innovation that they need without working with partners who are out there, responding to the absolute most recent threats. Like, that is an absolute necessity, but the thing that is missing is, at least in the larger institutions, I mean, government included, is the ability to quickly adapt those innovations and make sure they're integrated into your security systems before you're too late. I mean, the cyber cycle is so fast right now. The threats are evolving so quickly. If it takes you 18 months to get your innovation in-house, you've already missed that whole threat. So I think that is something that everyone acknowledges, the need for outside help and assistance. But in many organizations, even nimble ones, the challenge of actually effectively effectuating it internally and making it a part of what you do on a day-to-day basis.
I would like to say this one thing, because I had not been aware of what ERI does, and 2 years putting together this wide matrix of companies. Here's this huge threat, which is the discarded estate of computers and devices, and no one mentioned it. And so we're actually going to form a partnership with these guys because it's obviously a threat vector, and it's also a threat vector that is handled by some of the least of those our brethren. It's no one who has a big title that's disposing of your computers.
So you heard it here first.
The true partnership.
New partnership. I did want to follow on, Mary, because I know that you guys have this concept of cyber SWAT teams, and so I do think it's really important to double back. James mentioned that, oftentimes in large organizations, you have the luxury of both. You have the luxury of building some of these solutions in-house, and then also outsourcing and kind of picking and choosing when you want. Smaller organizations don't necessarily have that option, and so it came up earlier that law firms have notoriously terrible security. And part of that is also because, you're talking about organizations that are partnerships that are built on, human resources and human capital, and so budgets tend to go towards that and not necessarily towards the IT infrastructure. And the same can be said of a lot of other service-oriented, companies, not the least of which might be, financial and investment firms that might be here today. And so I do think it's important to also recognize that managed security service providers in particular can offer a way to mature a small organization and a small operation without having to completely break the bank.
I think that that's very true. I also think that there needs to be a willingness to verify that your managed MSSRP is as good as you think it is. because I have talked to managing partners of major law firms here in New York who are litigators, and when I mention potential vulnerabilities that I know exist, they just say, but my guys say I've got it handled. And there is no, where they would never accept that from in any way, shape, or form in any other subset of their professional life. They just are baffled by it. They don't want the answer in many cases, and they just want to say it's handled. Yet, in many cases, boards have fiduciary responsibility and actually carry potential personal liability if they don't audit their cybersecurity and actually find out if it is as good as they say it is. So I think managed solutions are a great option, but you should periodically bring in a third party to test that it's as good as you think it is. Otherwise, you could end up really holding the bag.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just add when you've got about 1 million employee gap, you can't do due diligence on every single one of your partners.
No.
And that's a requirement under GDPR, under every law. And so by having those managed groups, those SWAT teams, you're able to do your due diligence on the one vendor and check their process so that then you can have that level of trust that their partners are also compliant. It's not ideal. Obviously, in a perfect world, you will check every single T and cross every I, but it's just not a reality.
Or the opposite, depending.
Yeah.
James, if you could speak to it maybe a little bit more in depth related to EDC and possibly what New York City is doing more broadly. Is there a methodology that your organization uses to think about what you would outsource versus what you actually choose to actually maintain in-house? Or is that revealing too much?
No, that's not. Well, I guess I would say it's a balance. I mean, also working in the public sector, at least in the city government. Yeah, I can't speak to the NSA, but it doesn't come with the same. Working in cybersecurity for the city government does not necessarily come with the panache of working for the NSA or the CIA. Call me crazy. They don't write a lot of spy shows about EDC's cyber compliance team. But I think that the result is we actually have, on the one hand, we have an excellent team. But the reality is we do rely heavily on the private sector for a lot of the for a lot of the threats that we're dealing with. So it really is across the board. The vast majority of our budget obviously gets spent on our cyber budget gets spent on outsourced as opposed to insourced. We will build our own system, like operational systems, but from a cyber perspective, we're almost not entirely outsourcing, but largely outsourcing or having custom products built to address the needs that we're trying to address.
Well, and if you really want to, if you can, try to see the Cyber Command, if you can get some sort of an insider tour.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Because, and you'll also find that there's an embedded team from Cisco, there's an embedded team from AT&T, there's an embedded team from Microsoft in there, and it's literally a meeting of the minds when anything is going wrong or potentially going wrong. And so I would implore you to look at it. And it is actually pretty sexy. And Dick Wolf has actually written a series of novels about New York City Cyber Command. So.
I haven't read them, but I have. Well, it's true.
I will say I've had a chance to go there, and it is an impressive sight to behold. For those of us who are here, in the post 9/11 era, New York City has become a benchmark.
It's across the board. And also, it's just we've since 9/11, the NYPD has had to become a terrorism organization, an anti-terrorism organization. The complete change in the where the world was pre 9/11, and that obviously applies to cyber threats as well, because there's so many risks. We've built an entire organization just dedicated to that at the PD, because New York City is such a target and threat across the board, whether it's cyber or terrorism in general. And from an economic development perspective, it's a huge risk.
Yeah. One of the things that I noticed in conversations that we've had with the city was that I felt like they were ahead of the game when it came to actually integration of IT and physical security. And we saw that actually with the Cyber Command as well. It's another area of potential partnership. I think we're starting to see some real convergence, especially when it comes to critical infrastructure monitoring. I was with a company that was in the SIM space 15 plus years ago now, and we were implementing SCADA monitoring solutions using SIM tools that long ago. But it was a pretty rare thing to do, and it really kind of is just now in the last several years we've started to see this real resurgence. We're starting to see companies that are dedicated to SCADA monitoring and things like that. I'd be curious to know if you're seeing, Mary or James, in particular, if you're seeing needs or requests related to this integration of IT and physical security and this convergence as it relates to critical infrastructure.
I'm sure you're living it every day. But we've been asked to assess a medium-sized city out west, their sustainability and resilience program. Now they want to integrate cybersecurity into it, and they want the power grid and the water supply. Their water supply, being out west, is single source of failure. Many water supply chain command and control structures are controlled by farmers. And if you think that electrical utilities are behind the curve, I'm here to tell you water supply is a really big problem across this country. And most of the West is single source of failure. And so there needs to be a lot more of this. And we actually, early in our Artemis Cyber world, were able to interact with a company that helped integrate all of the facial recognition, social media, and physical security in London. And it is incredibly robust, but kind of terrifying. So that if One World Trade Center sees somebody who is out of place in social media, who's suddenly showing up there and has been making threats and went from puppy posts to anger, police could actually be deployed to intercept that person before they got there. It's that level of integration that now is possible that probably large holders of real estate in the city will be looking at in the next few years once it becomes more conventionally available.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I'd prefer actually not to talk too much about that particular topic in detail, but I will say, I mean, the city, we're very fortunate. Jeffrey Brown, who's the city's CISO, is exceptional and really been a pioneer in thinking about all of these threats, and also in, as I said, partnering with our academic institutions on both the talent side and also the innovation side. But there are a lot of threats.
Yeah, I mean, clearly that, but I think what's interesting is we're now, I think, seeing the commercial application of this actually start to catch up. And so, that's probably a good segue into this sort of last topic area that I wanted to discuss, because this is a cyber investing summit. So the last piece was thinking about cybersecurity companies and their partnering or partner channel strategies and how you would evaluate those relative to the strength of a prospective investment. And so I can sort of start there just by, flipping hats for myself and, sitting in the VC seat for a second. I believe, especially for B2B organizations, that, channel strategies are critical for smaller organizations. I think we heard earlier that there's somewhere around on the order of 3,000 cybersecurity companies out there in the ether today. And so how does a small, new, innovative startup actually really get a reasonably sized footprint and have a chance to break out amongst the noise? And I think part of that is the sort of network effect that comes with a really robust channel strategy. So I'm a big believer in B2B partnerships as a way to take what is a small, innovative startup and really propel it into the upper echelons. And hopefully, get a company on what should be an exponential path to success. So that's sort of my perspective on it, but I'd love to hear everyone else on the panel.
Well, he's economic development. He's doing it every day.
Well, we're trying. I mean, right. I mean, that's our goal. I mean, I don't want to speak it from the investing lens, but I will. I mean, we know And our biggest value proposition in New York City is the customer base that's here. I mean, we all talked about it. And so what we want to do is try and make customer acquisition easier for New York City companies. You know, I referenced my financial institution example earlier of how hard it is to get those, to actually have those conversations and actually become a client of one of the larger institutions. I think what our goal, what we're trying to do, is bring as many of these corporate partners to the table through our accelerator program and actually get everyone in one room. So there's more of a curated way for folks to see the opportunities, because it's the only possible way to sort through all the noise. We do the same thing in the digital health space. All of these healthcare companies, I mean, they're like, please, everyone, go form one company and then come to us. I mean, you know, it's great that you all have your one individual solution for your one problem, but we would really like to see people come together. So I mean, there's obviously going to be consolidation of this industry as all these innovations get picked up. But in the meantime, what we want to do is try and provide a logical pathway, a trustworthy pathway for customers to be able to come and sit at a table and say, I know that the 15 things I'm going to see today are validated through a series of partners that I trust, so that I'm not just seeing some crazy person who has an idea, but I have no way of knowing. I mean, as you said, the government does have a validating role to play, and we want to play that role from an economic development perspective, so we can get people in the door, because we know that, you know, venture capitalists and others are going to look for that customer base, and which will be the pathway to growing their companies.
I think you're judged. This is a trust-based business.
Yeah.
Period. So you need to find allies who are powerful and who have impeccable reputations, and gain their trust, and then be shoulder to shoulder with them at the very least as you're presenting your new solution to corporate partners that more established person is willing to introduce. I think you need a force multiplier effect in order to make your way through this marketplace. And I think that efforts that are being made by the state, there's the New York City Partnership that is very powerful, that was founded by Henry Kravis and a bunch of other corporate titans about 20 odd years ago. It's another pathway here in New York City. I think that these things are available. I also think that, you know, support women in STEM. You know, we need a whole bunch of, you know, we need all the innovative minds we can doing this, and if someone calls you who you don't know but has the right pedigree, at least give them a listen, because a lot of 3,000 companies is a tremendous number. It's way too many, but probably 500 of those get a decent audience from the people that they need. If we could even increase that, then we might accelerate the combination of some of these great ideas into more efficient entities for investment purposes.
Yeah, I mean, on our end, every time we have investors looking through ours, I mean, that's what they're looking for, is those channel partnerships, be it our partnership with the City of New York, with Staples B2B program, with our OEMs. That's where they're focusing their attention, on the sustainability of that and the ability for us to grow through those partnerships as well as on our own. So that's just, you know, it really builds us so much.
Yeah.
The other thing is that people, CIOs, if you have one, or CISOs, they're so overwhelmed that another software solution is the last thing that they want to think about, because they don't even, sometimes are barely managing what they've got. And so if you can find someone who can integrate this new technology into a broader view of a solution for a company or an entity, then I think you're more likely to be adopted.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I've said many times that I have a lot of empathy for people who are sitting in the CISO chair, just because it's so cloudy, right? Yeah. You know, it's very difficult to find the sort of lanes of distinction amongst all the cybersecurity companies out there, and there's a lot of blending going on very purposefully, because everyone sort of wants to own as much of their vertical stack as possible. And so, you know, you see that, you know, vulnerability players are moving into SOAR, and you know, the IT service management folks are backing into vulnerability because that's a source of information for them. And so if you're trying to actually build a meaningful reference architecture for your organization, it can be really tough to figure out, because the Venn diagram is completely overlapping. So it's a really tough place. And one of the areas that I think is actually compelling to look at and evaluating companies to actually, look at their channel strategy, understand who they're partnered up with, because those are strategic levers of success beyond the sort of Class A customers that they might have in their portfolio. Well, at this point, we've got a fantastic set of minds up here, and so I wanted to try to open things up to questions if we've got some. And where are we on? 2 minutes. Okay, so all right.
One question.
Anybody have questions? Yes. No. Or are we going to coffee break early? Go ahead.
So you were founder of Vigilant, right? So
Yes.
When you worked with Vigilant, did you have any success with partnerships before you exited out the company?
Yeah. So we wouldn't have succeeded at all as a company without our partnerships. We really got our start as a consultancy and a managed security service provider, and essentially funded our way to building our own threat intelligence platform through the profits off of those earlier strategies. But in so doing, we partnered with a number of different product players whose tools we used initially, and off of which we then piggybacked and built our own intellectual property. But so if it hadn't been for the partnerships that we had in the security information event management space, we wouldn't have had a business model to work from. Beyond that, we also had integration partners because we typically are building on-prem managed security service solutions, which is a little shift of the outsourcing paradigm. Because we had such large-scale client base, we had the luxury of being right here. So most of our customers were Fortune 100. And they typically required highly customized solutions. So we would build out custom application layer monitoring solutions for them using off-the-shelf technology that we then had to tweak quite a bit in order to make it function the way the end customer needed. So that also meant we were typically engaging with a number of other service providers who were inside the organization. Yeah. Other questions? I didn't mean for it to go to me, but that's fine.
It was a good one.
All right, well, I just want to say thanks to everyone on the panel today. Thanks, everyone. And good night, good coffee break.